this. It's not that I'm not giving Danny Jacobs a chance. If you look at the resume of Golovkin, you have to ask yourself, well, is Martin Murray at the time Golovkin fought him better than Danny Jacobs? Is Gabriel Rosado better than Danny Jacobs? Is Willie Monroe better than Danny Jacobs? And if David Lemieux was at that point in time better than Danny Jacobs? Now, Danny Jacobs, in my opinion, is the most skilled middleweight that he has fought since somewhat. I'm talking about like skill. I'm talking about as a fighter overall since Willie Monroe. And the reason why I'm not counting Kell Brook is because Kell Brook is a 154-pounder fighting at 147, but fought that fight against Golovkin at 160. Anyway, I'm T-Street Controversy. This is T-Street Controversy Live. We are now 5 days away from Golovkin versus Jacobs, and I'm buying a pay-per-view. I'm not going to the fight. So, as you know, or if you don't know, I buy all pay-per-views. The only fights that, I don't buy is the ones I can't buy. So, it's like this, right? So much is on the line for the fight. For example, if Golovkin beats Danny Jacobs, it's heavily rumored that the fight between him and Billy Joe Saunders is done for June. Now, I'm going to explain that in a whole separate video, but basically, Billy Joe Saunders, mandatory, I forgot how to pronounce his name, Lou DiBella fighter, Kurt Cedes, or let's not butcher his name. Basically, look him up. He's fighting for the WBO interim title. Why is there a WBO interim title? In my personal opinion, he took some step-aside money. But like I said, we got to do a whole video talking about that later on. But if he loses to Danny Jacobs, then what are people going to say? I say they give Danny Jacobs his full credit and not say that, well, Golovkin was old or he never was good in the first place. Because even though with the lack of competition, and mostly the reason because of that lack of competition is because he's been going after titles to be undisputed. The last undisputed champion in the four-belt era was Jermaine Taylor, and that was in 2005. For some reason, fans, not the boxers, not the fighters, but fans take credit away from a fighter who wants to be undisputed champion. And to be undisputed champion, you got to fight a whole bunch of some nobodies sometimes. So let's go through it really, really quickly, right? When he fought Daniel Gill, that was to be elevated to the WBA Super World Champion. When he fought Marco Antonio Rubio, that was to eliminate the WBC Interim Champion. He was the WBC Interim Champion because Sergio Martinez was injured. And at that point in time, he was chasing Canelo. So basically, he had to fight Marco Antonio Rubio to get him out of the way, or he would have to fight him later. He fought Martin Murray, the future WBC mandatory at that point in time for the WBC Silver Champion. The Willie Monroe fight was somewhat of a free fight. Then he fought David Lemieux for the IBF Championship, right? Capturing another belt. Dominic Wade was the IBF mandatory. And then Kell Brook, he strictly fought him for the money. There's no better way to explain it than that. Now, in this case, Danny Jacobs, if you don't know, he was diagnosed with cancer, a cancerous tumor that wrapped around his spine. That was in 2011. He didn't fight again until 2012, but since he lost to a fighter by the name of Dmitry Pirog, who's retired at this point in time, if you notice, even though Danny Jacobs was up on the cards, he was having some problems adjusting to the style and barely winning those rounds, if he did, in my opinion, up until he got knocked out in the 5th round. You see what I'm saying? So go back and watch that fight. So even though that fight was back in 2010, damn near 7 years ago, that the way he lost, the fact that he was knocked out cold and momentarily unconscious, that has followed him throughout his career, which is the reason why a lot of people are not giving him a chance because of that loss he had. He's been knocked out before, But fighters who do get knocked out or have been stopped before, that's not saying, okay, well, the next time you go up against a hard puncher, you're going to get knocked out. But then guess what? In August of 2015, at a fight that I was at, he gets knocked down by the light punching Sergio Mora. Now, it was a flash knockdown, don't get me wrong, but still now fans are like, oh, you got knocked out by Dmitry Pirog all those years ago when you had the dingy braids. He had those nappy looking ass braids, and then, you get knocked down several years later by a light punch of Sergio Mora, even though he did beat Sergio Mora in the rematch. So fans are saying, well, if he can go down to Sergio Mora and he's been knocked out by Pirog, then Golovkin is going to destroy him. You see what I'm saying? But if you look at it, he's in my opinion going to be the most effective outside of Kell Brook and outside of Willie Monroe, because Willie Monroe may be somewhat You can consider him an accurate puncher, but he's got no power behind those punches. And truth be told, in my opinion, he's a 154-pounder fighting at 160 because, weight, whatever the case may be. But anyway, Golovkin, then what was it tomorrow? Oh, Danny Jacobs is an accurate puncher, and he's a hard puncher. So just like he said during HBO 24/7, what if he's able to land those same shots that Kell Brook landed on Golovkin, himself? So what about all this Mexican style Golovkin talks about, like where he likes to test his opponent's power? Is he really that crazy to want to get punched in the face, or is that defensive flaw? And if Golovkin was to try to do that with Danny Jacobs, then he's probably going to get knocked the fuck out because remember, he is human. Now we've seen Golovkin take some tough shots. Most notably, most recently, even though it wasn't recent, you saw him take a big shot from Curtis Stevens when he had like a little millisecond when he had a little wobble in his legs. So it's not that Golovkin can't be hurt. We also remember the uppercut that Kell Brook had delivered. What if Kell Brook was a 160-pounder? What if Danny Jacobs landed that uppercut? We don't know. We're just gonna have to see. So even though Golovkin's 36-0 with 33 KOs, by the way, you have to look at the fact that Danny Jacobs is 32-1 with 29 KOs, and he's won 12 straight fights, all by stoppage. He's only been 10 rounds once, from my understanding, and also he's won 10 straight fights since coming back from cancer. When people say he probably will never fight again. But anyway, I don't want to keep this video too long. I'm going with Gennady Golovkin. But I would not be surprised if Danny Jacobs pulls it off. Now, the reason why I'm going with Gennady Golovkin is because that's where the smart money should go. Like I said, look at what I said. You have to look at the fact that Danny Jacobs been knocked out before. No matter how you slice it, he's been knocked out before, so that has to play a factor. And then going down to the light punch of Sergio Mora, you have to say, okay, well, then if Sergio Mora can put him down, then common sense would tell you definitely Golovkin can put him down. Whether it was a defensive flaw on Danny Jacobs' part or not. And we know that Golovkin can cut off the ring. But I say that Danny Jacobs shouldn't try to box him. I say Danny Jacobs needs to go out there and try to fuck him up. But anyway, we're back now doing videos full time. About 3 to 5 videos a day. Of course, I'm going to be watching the fight. We're going to be doing a live stream. I'm probably going to do, meaning after the fight, I'm probably going to do one sometime this week. Probably maybe either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. I know that's a little wide time span. But I'll let you guys know. I'm T-Street Controversy. This is T-Street Controversy Live at FightView360.com. We are providing full coverage. Well, not full coverage, but we're providing, a substantial amount of coverage for this fight on the website right down below, FightView360.com. And things are in place. Thanks for the support. Please subscribe, share, comment, and like.